The lights in Murphy's bar flickered as another freight ship docked at Nexus 7. Captain Zektar barely looked up from his drink. The massive trade station always shook when the big ships came in. What bothered him more were the whispers. Everyone was talking about the same thing tonight. Sensors picking up strange readings from the Maelstrom sector, ships that shouldn't exist, energy signatures that made no sense. The old-timers called it ghost stories. Zektar called it nonsense. "I'm telling you, something big is moving out there," said Corvin, a cargo pilot with 3 eyes and nervous habits. He kept looking over his shoulder as he spoke. "My cousin works sensor duty on the border stations. Says they've been getting readings for weeks now." Zektar drained his glass and stood up. "Your cousin sees things that aren't there. The Maelstrom sector has been dead for 300 years. Nothing lives in that radiation soup." But as he walked away, Zektar heard more voices. A merchant from the outer rim claimed her ship's computer had picked up transmissions in an unknown language. A salvage crew swore they saw massive shadows moving through the nebula clouds. Even the station's AI seemed jumpy tonight, running extra security scans every few minutes. Dr. Lorena Voss sat in the corner booth, listening to everything. Her blue skin marked her as Andorian, but her interest in old stories made her an outsider among her own people. She had come to Nexus 7 to study trade routes from before the plague years. Instead, she found herself collecting rumors about ghost ships. The stories all pointed to the same place: the Maelstrom sector, the Forbidden Zone, the place where nothing was supposed to live anymore. 3 centuries ago, something terrible had happened there. The official records called it the Void Plague, a disease that ate through ship hulls and drove crews insane. The Galactic Hegemony had quarantined the entire sector, placing warning beacons around its borders. No one was allowed in. No one ever came out. But tonight, the rumors suggested something had changed. Lorena pulled out her data pad and started taking notes. The merchant had mentioned energy readings that spiked every 12 hours. The salvage crew described shapes that were too big to be asteroids but moved too fast to be space debris. The sensor operator talked about signals that seemed almost like communication attempts. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the nervous cargo pilot. "You mentioned your cousin on the border stations. Which station?" Corvin looked at her with his 3 eyes, each one showing a different emotion: fear, curiosity, and something that might have been hope. "Station Omega 7. Why do you ask?" "I study old history, pre-plague civilizations. If something is really happening out there, I need to know about it." The pilot leaned closer, lowering his voice. "My cousin says the readings started small, just blips on the sensors, but they're getting stronger, and they're moving toward the border." Across the station, Admiral Korath sat in his command center, staring at reports that officially didn't exist. The Hegemony Council had ordered him to investigate the rumors quietly. What he found worried him more than any official briefing ever had. The border stations were detecting something, multiple contacts moving in formation through the dead zones of the Maelstrom sector. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the Hegemony's databases. More troubling, the signals seemed to be getting stronger and more organized. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "the Council wants to know if we should increase patrols." Korath nodded slowly. "Double the border guard, but keep it quiet. If word gets out that something is actually in the Forbidden Zone, we'll have panic across half the galaxy." He didn't mention his real worry. The energy readings weren't random. They showed patterns, purpose, intelligence. Something was out there, and it was planning something. Back in Murphy's bar, the conversations had grown quieter but more intense. A group of miners claimed their deep space scanners had picked up metal signatures too pure to be natural asteroids. A communications officer swore her equipment had recorded part of a transmission in perfect mathematical sequences. Lyrena gathered every story she could find. The details were different, but the message was the same. Something large and technological was moving through the Maelstrom sector. Something that shouldn't exist. She thought about the official histories she had studied. The records always said the same thing about the plague years. A terrible disease had wiped out several species. The humans had been among the first to disappear. Most scholars believed humanity had been a minor species anyway, barely worth mentioning in galactic history. But Lorena had found fragments of older records, references to something called the Sol Armada, mentions of Terran battle groups, names like Earth Defense Fleet. The pieces didn't match the official story of humans as a weak, primitive species. A drunken Kytharian stumbled past her table muttering to himself. Humans, he said to no one in particular. Should have left them alone. Should have listened when they said they'd be back. Lorena grabbed his arm. What did you say about humans? The old alien looked at her with yellow eyes that seemed too clear for someone who had been drinking. Ancient history, young scholar, from before they decided humans were just myths. But some of us remember the real stories. What real stories? Stories about the last great fleet that went into the dark places and never came back. Stories about ships that could bend space itself. Stories about the day the humans said they weren't running away, just going somewhere the galaxy couldn't follow. He pulled his arm free. But those are just legends now. The Council made sure of that. As the night shift began on Nexus 7, the rumors continued to spread. In cargo bays and maintenance tunnels, in officer lounges and worker dormitories, beings from across the galaxy shared the same impossible stories. Something was coming out of the Forbidden Zone. Something that had been hiding in the dead spaces between stars for 300 years. Something that the galaxy had forgotten was possible. Dr. Lorena Voss returned to her quarters with a head full of questions and a datapad full of notes. The official histories claimed the Maelstrom sector was empty. The rumors suggested otherwise, and somewhere in between lay the truth about what had really happened during the plague years. She pulled up her research files and started cross-referencing dates. The plague outbreak, the human disappearance, the establishment of the Forbidden Zone. According to the records, it had all happened within a few months. But as she dug deeper, she found gaps. Missing reports, deleted files, classified sections that even her academic clearance couldn't access. Someone had worked very hard to erase certain parts of galactic history. Outside her window, the stars of the Maelstrom sector twinkled in the distance. They looked peaceful enough. But if the rumors were true, something was stirring in that ancient darkness. Something that remembered when the galaxy was different. Something that might remember humanity. As Lorena finally fell asleep, she didn't notice the slight fluctuation in the station's sensors, a brief energy spike that matched no known signature in the hegemony databases. A signal that seemed to pulse once, as if in acknowledgement, before fading back into the cosmic background. In the depths of space, something vast and patient continued, its slow journey toward the borders of known civilization. Something that had been waiting a very long time to come home. Dr. Lorena Voss spent 3 days digging through the archives of Nexus 7. What she found made her question everything she thought she knew about galactic history. The official records were clean and simple. The Void Plague had appeared suddenly, in the Maelstrom sector 300 years ago. It infected ships and stations, driving crews insane before destroying their vessels. The plague spread quickly, forcing the hegemony to quarantine the entire region. Several minor species had been lost, including the humans of Earth. But the deeper Lorena dug, the more the story fell apart. She found supply manifests that mentioned Terran heavy cruisers, requiring ammunition shipments large enough to arm entire fleets. She discovered communication logs that referenced Earth Command as a major military authority. Most interesting, she found energy consumption records that showed human colonies using power levels that suggested advanced technology. None of this matched the story of humans as a primitive, barely spacefaring species. Professor Malik, she said into her communicator, I need to speak with you. Professor Theron Malik taught mythology at the University of Andor Prime. He was old, even by Catharian standards, and most academics considered him eccentric. But Lorena knew he had spent decades studying what he called lost technological civilizations. They met in his cluttered office on the education deck of Nexus 7. Books and data crystals covered every surface. Star charts covered the walls, many marked with symbols Lorena didn't recognize. Dr. Voss, Malik said, his forearms organizing papers while he spoke. I heard you've been asking questions about the plague years. I've been finding inconsistencies in the historical records, things that don't match the official story about human civilization. Malik's yellow eyes brightened. You've discovered that humans weren't quite as primitive as the histories claim. You know about this? The old professor pulled out a thick folder marked with security warnings. I've been collecting evidence for 40 years. The Hegemony Council has done an excellent job of burying the truth, but they couldn't erase everything. He spread out documents across his desk: ship registration records, military deployment orders, technical specifications that made Larina's head spin. The humans had the most advanced fleet in the galaxy, Malik said quietly. Their ships were larger, faster, and more heavily armed than anything the Hegemony could build. They called it the Sol Armada. Larina stared at a technical diagram labeled UES Retribution, Dreadnought Class. The ship was massive, bristling, with weapons she couldn't identify. This can't be real. If humans had technology like this, why haven't we heard about it? Because the Hegemony lost a war they never wanted to admit they fought. Malik pulled out another document. A battle report marked, Classified, Eyes Only. The header read, Final Engagement, Maelstrom Sector, Human Fleet Status, Unknown. There was no plague, Malik said. There was a war. The Hegemony tried to force humanity into their system of government. Humans refused. The fighting lasted 50 years. Larina read through the report, her translator struggling with some of the technical terms. But the basic facts were clear. Human ships had been holding their own against the entire Hegemony fleet. They had developed weapons that could punch through any known armor. Their defensive systems could absorb energy attacks and redirect the power to their own weapons. What happened to them? They disappeared. The entire Sol Armada, along with their most advanced ship, the UES Retribution, jumped into the deepest part of the Maelstrom sector and vanished. The Hegemony declared victory and made up the plague story to explain why they had quarantined the region. Malik showed her more documents. Communication intercepts from the final battle. The last message from the human fleet had been simple. We're not surrendering. We're going somewhere you can't follow. This isn't over. But that was 300 years ago, Larina said. Even if they survived, they would have died of old age by now. Would they? Malik pulled out a medical report. Human lifespans were already longer than most species, and they had been experimenting with life extension technology. Some of their medical advances were centuries ahead of anything we have now. A chime from Larina's communicator interrupted them. She had set up alerts for any news from the border stations. The message that came through made her blood run cold. Energy readings in the Maelstrom sector have increased by 300% in the last 12 hours. Unknown contacts are moving toward the border at significant velocity. All ships are ordered to maintain safe distance from the Forbidden Zone. Malik looked at the message and smiled grimly. It seems our timing is quite good, Dr. Voss. You think this is connected to the humans? I think the humans never left. They've been out there for 3 centuries and now they're coming back. Larina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. But why now? What's changed? Before Malik could answer, emergency sirens began wailing throughout Nexus 7. The station's AI announced in multiple languages. All civilian traffic is suspended. Military vessels are ordered to border patrol status. This is not a drill. Through the office window, they could see Hegemony warships launching from the station's military docks. The ships formed up in defensive formations and headed toward the edge of the Maelstrom sector. Professor, Larina said slowly, if the humans really have been out there all this time, what have they been doing? Malik gathered up his documents and locked them in a secure case. That, my dear doctor, is the question that should terrify us all. The humans who disappeared into the Maelstrom sector were already the most advanced military force in the galaxy. If they've had 300 years to improve their technology... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Admiral Korath's command center buzzed with activity. Every screen showed sensor readings from the border stations. The energy signatures from the Forbidden Zone were unlike anything in their databases. They were massive, organized, and moving with purpose. "Sir," his communication officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the anomaly." "What kind of transmission?" It's in an unknown language, sir. But the translation computers are picking up mathematical sequences, prime numbers, basic physics constants. It seems to be some kind of greeting protocol." Korath felt ice in his veins. "A greeting protocol? You mean first contact procedures?" "Yes, sir. Someone is trying to establish communication." The Admiral stared at the main screen, where long-range sensors showed massive shapes moving through the nebula clouds of the Maelstrom sector. Whatever was out there, it was intelligent, it was organized, and it was coming toward them. "Get me a direct line to Hegemony Command," he ordered. "Tell them we may have a first contact situation." But even as he said it, Korath suspected this wasn't first contact at all. This was something much more complicated and much more dangerous. Dr. Lorena Voss and Professor Malik watched the military preparations from the observation deck. Around them, civilians pressed against the windows, trying to see what was happening in the distance. "Professor," Lorena said quietly, "if you're right about this, if the humans are really coming back after 300 years, what do you think they want?" Malik looked out at the stars of the Maelstrom sector, where something vast was stirring. "After centuries of silence, I think," he said slowly, "they want to finish the conversation." The space around Nexus 7 twisted and folded in ways that hurt to look at. Reality seemed to bend inward on itself, creating a whirlpool of stars and darkness. Then, with a flash that temporarily blinded every sensor in the system, something enormous dropped out of dimensional fold space. The UES Retribution hung in space like a sleeping giant. The ship was massive beyond anything in the current galactic fleet. Its hull stretched for kilometers, covered in armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapon ports dotted its surface like the eyes of some ancient predator. And along its sides, in letters that glowed with their own internal light, was written, "United Earth Ship Retribution." Admiral Korath stared at the main screen in his command center, watching his sensors struggle to get accurate readings on the vessel. Every time they locked onto the ship, the numbers changed. It was as if the Retribution existed in several dimensions at once. "Sir," his tactical officer said in a voice that barely controlled panic, "the ship is larger than our biggest space station. Its energy signature is off the charts, and sir, it's not showing up as hostile on our threat assessment systems." "What do you mean?" "I mean, our computers can't classify it as an enemy vessel. It's like they recognize it as friendly." Before Korath could respond, every communication system in the fleet activated at once. A clear, calm voice spoke in perfect galactic standard. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Ship Retribution. We're coming home." The transmission cut off, leaving silence across dozens of ship bridges. Then the questions started flooding in from every vessel in the fleet. Who were these humans? Where had they come from? How was their ship so advanced? On Nexus 7, Dr. Lorena Voss and Professor Malik pressed against the observation windows with hundreds of other beings, all staring at the impossible sight in space. The human ship dominated the view, making the largest hegemony vessels look like toys in comparison. "It's real," Lorena whispered. "They're really real." Malik nodded, his 4 arms trembling slightly. 300 years. They've been out there for 300 years. Around them, the crowd murmured in dozens of languages. Fear, excitement, confusion, and awe mixed together in a sound that seemed to represent the entire galaxy's reaction to learning that humanity was not extinct. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, looking out at the hegemony fleet that had formed a defensive line between her ship and the trade station. She was tall and lean, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her uniform was clearly human in design, but made from materials that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "Scanner report," she said to her crew. "Same species as before, Captain," replied her tactical officer. A man whose left arm was made of some kind of advanced mechanical replacement. Hegemony fleet. Composition hasn't changed much in 3 centuries. Still using fusion reactors and projectile weapons. Chen nodded. They've barely advanced at all. Open a channel to the flagship. The transmission reached Admiral Korath's bridge moments later. This time the image came with it. Captain Chen appeared on the main screen, and Korath found himself looking at a human being for the first time in his life. "Admiral," Chen said, reading his rank insignia with ease, "I need to speak with your government representatives. We have urgent business to discuss." Korath struggled to find his voice. "Captain Chen, I don't understand. Our records show that humanity was destroyed by the Void Plague 3 centuries ago." Chen's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "Your records show what the Hegemony Council wanted them to show. There was no plague. Admiral, there was a war. A war you started and we finished. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm talking about the 50-year conflict that ended when the Hegemony tried to force Earth into submission. I'm talking about the final battle in this very sector, when we chose exile over surrender. I'm talking about 300 years of fighting horrors in the dark so that the galaxy could sleep peacefully. The transmission switched to external views from the Retribution. What the Admiral saw made him sick. Space itself seemed wounded around the human ship. Reality was torn in places, showing glimpses of something that looked like the inside of a cosmic wound. And moving through those tears were shapes that hurt to look at directly. "What are those things?" Korath asked. "Void spawns. Creatures from dimensions where physics work differently. They've been trying to break into our reality for millennia. The Maelstrom sector is where the barriers are thinnest. That's why we went there. Someone had to hold the line." Chen switched the view back to her bridge. Behind her, Korath could see displays showing star charts marked with battle sites, damage reports that spoke of impossible conflicts, and crew members who moved with the efficiency of soldiers who had been fighting for their entire lives. "Captain, if what you're saying is true, then humanity has been protecting the galaxy all this time?" "Not by choice at first. You exiled us to the one place in the galaxy where something worse than war was waiting. But we adapted. We survived. And we learned that someone had to stand guard against the things that live in the dark between dimensions." Dr. Lorena Voss had managed to access the communication feed from her research terminal. She listened to the conversation between Chen and Korath with growing amazement. Everything Professor Malik had told her was true. Humanity hadn't died out. They had become something else entirely. "Professor," she said, "look at their technology readings." Malik examined the sensor data streaming across her screen. The numbers were impossible. The Retribution's power output exceeded anything in the Hegemony fleet by orders of magnitude. Its hull was made from materials that didn't exist in any known periodic table. Its weapon systems generated energy signatures that suggested they could crack planets. "They've advanced 3 centuries beyond anything we have," Malik said quietly, "fighting in conditions that would kill most species, learning from enemies that exist outside normal space-time." On the screen, Captain Chen was still talking to Admiral Korath. "We're not here to resume the old war, Admiral. We're here because something's changed. The barriers between dimensions are weakening across the galaxy, not just in the Maelstrom sector. We've been tracking void spawn activity moving toward populated systems. You're saying there's a threat to galactic civilization? I'm saying there's a threat to reality itself. And like it or not, we're the only ones who know how to fight it." Chen gestured to someone off-screen. The view changed to show long-range sensor readings. Massive signatures were moving through deep space, approaching from the rim of the galaxy. The shapes were wrong somehow, existing in too many dimensions at once. The void spawn have found a way to manifest in normal space without needing dimensional tiers. They're coming, Admiral, and your fleets won't be able to stop them. Admiral Korath stared at the sensor readings, trying to understand what he was seeing. The approaching signatures were vast, larger than space stations, and they moved with patterns that made no sense according to known physics. "What do you want from us, Captain?" "Nothing. We're not asking for permission or support. We're telling you what's going to happen. Humanity will continue to defend this galaxy, because someone has to. But the lies end now. No more stories about plagues or primitive humans. The galaxy is going to learn the truth. Chen's image filled the screen, and Korath saw something in her eyes that he recognized from his own battles. The look of someone who had seen the worst the universe could offer and kept fighting anyway. We never surrendered, Admiral. We never ran away. We went to the darkest corner of the galaxy and held the line for 300 years, and we're still here. The transmission ended, leaving the hegemony fleet floating in space, facing a ship that represented everything they thought. They knew about the universe being wrong. On Nexus 7, word was already spreading. Humanity was alive. They were advanced beyond imagination, and they had been protecting the galaxy all along. Dr. Lorena Voss looked out at the Retribution, its dark hull gleaming with technologies she couldn't understand, and realized that galactic history would have to be completely rewritten. The age of human mythology was over. The age of human reality had begun. 3 days after the Retribution's arrival, the first reports came in from the deep dark. Long-range scout ships that had been sent to investigate the strange sensor readings were returning with news that chilled every military commander in the galaxy. Captain Elena Vasquez limped her badly damaged scout ship into the outer system, her crew barely alive, and her ship's hull covered in what looked like crystalline growths. Her transmission to Admiral Korath was short and terrifying. "Admiral, we found them. God help us, we found what's coming." In the medical bay of Nexus 7, Vasquez struggled to explain what her crew had seen. Dr. Lorena Voss and Professor Malik had been granted permission to interview the survivors, since they were now considered the galaxy's leading experts on forgotten threats. "They weren't ships," Vasquez said, her voice shaking. "Not like anything we understand as ships. They were structures, crystalline formations the size of moons, but they moved like living things. They bent space around them just by existing." Professor Malik leaned forward. "Can you describe their technology?" "Technology?" Vasquez laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Professor, these things didn't have technology. They were technology. Or maybe they were alive. I couldn't tell the difference. They existed in more dimensions than our sensors could track." Lorena pulled up the scout ship's sensor logs on her datapad. The readings made no sense. Energy signatures that flowed backward through time. Mass readings that suggested the objects were somehow heavier than they were large. Gravitational fields that created knots in space-time itself. "How many did you see?" "Hundreds. Maybe thousands. They were moving in formation toward the galactic core, and every few hours, smaller versions would split off from the main group and head toward populated systems." Meanwhile, aboard the Retribution, Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing the same sensor data with her senior staff. The bridge of the human ship was a study in controlled chaos. Displays showed dozens of dimensional tiers scattered across the galaxy. Energy readings tracked void spawn activity in sectors that had been peaceful for centuries. And at the center of it all, the massive fleet moving in from the deep dark. "Tactical assessment, Commander," Chen said to her first officer. Commander Jackson Rodriguez had been fighting void spawns for over 200 years. His body showed the marks of battles in dimensions where the laws of physics were suggestions. Half his face was covered by a breathing apparatus that helped him survive in normal atmosphere, after too many years breathing the toxic air of reality tiers. "It's worse than we thought, Captain. The void spawn aren't just scouting anymore, they're manifesting in full force. Whatever barrier was keeping them in their own dimension has completely collapsed." Chen nodded grimly. "How long before they reach the core worlds?" "At their current speed? 6 months. Maybe less if they figure out how to use galactic jump points." Dr. Elena Santos, the ship's chief scientist, looked up from her analysis station. Like most of the Retribution's crew, she bore the marks of 3 centuries fighting impossible enemies. Her left hand was covered by a glove that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, a side effect of handling void spawn technology. "Captain, I've been analyzing the enemy formations. They're not random. These creatures are following specific patterns, targeting systems with the highest population densities. They're not just invading, they're harvesting." Chen felt the familiar cold that came with understanding something terrible. Harvesting what? Reality itself. Every planet they touch, every star system they pass through. The fundamental laws of physics become more unstable. They're converting normal space into something like their home dimension. The implications hit everyone on the bridge at once. This wasn't just an invasion, it was a transformation. The Void Spawn weren't trying to conquer the galaxy. They were trying to remake it into something where they could exist permanently. Back on Nexus 7, Admiral Korath was receiving reports from across the galaxy. Border stations were detecting dimensional anomalies. Merchant ships were reporting encounters with creatures that phased in and out of normal space. Several Outer Rim colonies had gone silent completely. He called an emergency meeting with Captain Chen, Dr. Voss, and Professor Malik. The meeting took place in Nexus 7's main conference room, with the retribution visible through the large windows. Captain Chen, Korath began, we need to understand what we're facing. Our military analysts are telling me these void spawn are beyond anything our fleets can handle. Chen activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy with hundreds of red markers scattered across it. Admiral, your analysts are correct. Void spawn exist partially outside normal spacetime. Conventional weapons pass right through them. Energy shields actually feed them power, and they reproduce by converting matter from our dimension into their own. Lorena studied the display. How have you been fighting them for 3 centuries? By learning to think like they do. We don't fight them in normal space. We follow them into the dimensional tiers and battle them where physics work differently. It requires technology that most species would consider impossible. Chen gestured, and the display changed to show technical diagrams of human weapons. The designs hurt to look at, featuring components that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We've adapted our ships to function in reality storms. Our weapons fire coherent impossibility beams that can actually damage creatures made of living mathematics. Our armor is woven from crystallized time to protect against attacks that happen before they're launched. Professor Malik studied the diagrams with fascination and horror. This technology, how did you develop it? By fighting for our lives against enemies that rewrote the laws of physics as weapons. Every battle taught us something new about how reality works at its deepest levels. We learned to bend the rules because the alternative was extinction. Commander Rodriguez materialized on the display through quantum transmission, appearing ghost-like on the conference table. Captain, we're receiving reports from our scout ships. The main Void Spawn fleet has increased speed. They'll reach the first inhabited systems in 4 months, not 6. The room fell silent. 4 months to prepare for a threat that conventional. Military forces couldn't even touch. What can we do? Admiral Korath asked. Chen's expression was grim but determined. We do what humanity has been doing for 3 centuries. We fight. But this time we're not fighting alone. She activated another display, showing the Retribution's internal systems. We can modify a limited number of your ships with basic dimensional combat capabilities. It won't make them equal to our vessels, but it might let them survive long enough to be useful. How many ships can you modify? Maybe 50, if we work around the clock and strip non-essential systems from the Retribution. But that's not the real problem. What is? The Void Spawn aren't just coming from the deep dark. They're being called here by something inside the galaxy, something that's been preparing for this invasion for a very long time. Lyrena felt ice in her veins. You mean there are Void Spawn already here, living in our dimension? Not living, waiting. The Maelstrom sector wasn't just where reality was thin. It was where the first Void Spawn tried to establish a permanent foothold 3 centuries ago. We stopped them, but we couldn't kill them all. Some went into hibernation, waiting for the right moment to signal their home dimension. Chen's next. Words chilled everyone in the room. That signal went out 2 weeks ago. The Void Spawn fleet isn't just invading randomly. They're coming to support an army that's already here. Dr. Voss stared at the holographic display, watching the red markers spread across the galaxy like a disease. Where are they? The ones that are already here? Everywhere, Chen said quietly. Hidden in the depths of gas giants, sleeping in the cores of dead stars, buried in the hearts of asteroids. For 3 centuries they've been spreading throughout the galaxy, waiting for the signal to wake up. Admiral Korath felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a mountain. How do we fight an enemy that's already inside our territory? The same way we've always fought them, Chen replied. By refusing to give up, by adapting to impossible circumstances, by remembering that sometimes the only choice is to stand and fight, even when victory seems impossible. She looked around the room at the representatives of the galaxy that had exiled humanity 3 centuries ago. The question isn't how we fight them. The question is whether you trust us enough to let us teach you. Outside the conference room windows, the retribution hung in space like a monument to human determination. Its battle-scarred hull told the story of 3 centuries of impossible victories against unwinnable odds. And somewhere in the deep dark, a fleet of crystalline nightmares continued its approach, ready to remake reality itself in its own image. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin. The Void Fleet emerged from the deep dark like a cancer spreading across the galaxy. Reality twisted and screamed as crystalline ships the size of moons tore holes in space-time itself. The Hegemony's modified fleet, 50 ships equipped with humanity's impossible technology, waited in formation near the galactic core. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching sensor displays that showed the approaching nightmare. Around her, the crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had been fighting impossible wars for 3 centuries. "Status report," she called out. Commander Rodriguez looked up from his station. "Void Fleet is 30 minutes from the first inhabited system. Hegemony forces are in position, but Admiral Korath's people are struggling with the dimensional combat systems." Chen nodded. She had expected this. Teaching aliens to fight battles that existed outside normal physics was like teaching mathematics to people who had never seen numbers. Open a channel to the fleet. Admiral Korath's face appeared on the main screen, his expression showing the strain of commanding ships whose weapons he barely understood. Behind him, Chen could see his bridge crew working frantically with control systems that seemed to bend reality around them. "Captain Chen, our crews are reporting that the dimensional targeting systems are causing severe disorientation. Half my gunners are experiencing what our doctors are calling reality displacement syndrome." "That's normal, Admiral. Your people are learning to see in dimensions that their brains weren't designed to process. The disorientation will pass if they survive long enough." "That's not very reassuring." Chen's expression softened slightly. "Admiral, 300 years ago, the first human crews to use this technology had the same problems. We lost thousands of people learning to fight in ways that violated everything we thought we knew about warfare. But we learned because the alternative was extinction." Dr. Lorena Voss and Professor Malik watched the preparations from Nexus 7's observation deck. The station had been evacuated except for essential personnel and the scientists studying the void spawn threat. Around them, the modified hegemony ships hung in space like metal sculptures wrapped in impossible geometries. "Professor," Lorena said quietly, "do you think they can win?" Malik's forearms moved nervously as he studied the tactical displays. "I think humanity has been preparing for this battle for 3 centuries. If anyone can stop these creatures, it's them." Suddenly, space itself began to scream. The Void Fleet dropped out of dimensional transit at the edge of the system, and reality immediately began to break down around them. The crystalline ships didn't move through space so much as convince space to move around them. Their presence caused stars to flicker, gravity to flow backward, and time to run in circles. Captain Chen felt the familiar sensation of her ship's dimensional shields activating. The Retribution existed in several realities at once, allowing it to fight enemies that couldn't be touched by normal weapons. "All ships, this is Chen. Remember your training. Don't try to understand what you're seeing. Trust your instruments and follow my lead." The battle began when the Void Spawn opened fire with weapons that shot crystallized mathematics. The attacks existed as pure concept rather than energy, designed to rewrite the fundamental laws that held matter together. The hegemony ships fired back with their modified weapons, sending streams of coherent impossibility toward the enemy fleet. The Void Spawn ships absorbed the attacks and grew larger, feeding on the exotic energy. "Admiral," Chen called out, "switch to temporal disruption mode. We need to attack them in the past before they have time to adapt. Korath's response was strained. Captain, I don't understand what that means. It means you fire your weapons backward through time. Your targeting computer will guide the shots to hit the enemy ships before they realize they're under attack. The battle became something beyond normal comprehension. Human ships phased in and out of multiple dimensions, attacking void spawn vessels from angles that didn't exist in normal space. The enemy responded by turning themselves inside out, attacking from within their own past and future simultaneously. Commander Rodriguez coordinated the human attack patterns with the precision of someone who had fought similar battles hundreds of times. Captain, void spawn are adapting to the hegemony weapons faster than expected. Recommend switching to paradox bombardment. Chen nodded and opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, target the enemy flagship with paradox shells. Fire on my mark. Dr. Santos looked up from her science station. Captain, if we use paradox weapons in normal space, we could create a cascade effect that damages reality itself. Dr. Santos, if we don't stop them here, there won't be any reality left to damage. The Retribution's main guns charged with energy that existed in negative dimensions. When they fired, the shots traveled backward through cause and effect, hitting the void spawn flagship before Chen had given the order to shoot. The enemy vessel screamed as it was destroyed by an attack that violated the basic principles of time and space. Its death sent ripples through the void spawn fleet, causing several smaller ships to phase out of existence entirely. But the victory was temporary. More void spawn vessels emerged from dimensional tiers throughout the system, their crystalline hulls pulsing with alien life. Worse, the hidden sleeper agents throughout the galaxy were beginning to wake up. Admiral Korath's tactical display showed red warnings spreading across dozens of star systems. Captain Chen, we're receiving reports of void spawn manifestations in every sector of the galaxy. They're attacking from inside our own territory. Chen studied the reports with growing dread. The scope of the invasion was beyond anything they had prepared for. The void spawn had been planning this assault for centuries, placing sleeper agents in every corner of galactic civilization. All ships fall back to defensive positions around the core worlds. We can't stop them everywhere, but we can make our stand where it counts most. The retreat was orderly but desperate. Human and hegemony ships fought running battles against crystalline nightmares that bent reality around them like weapons. Several modified alien vessels were lost when their crews couldn't handle the strain of dimensional combat. But they reached the core worlds, where the real battle would be fought. The final engagement took place in the Sol system itself, the birthplace of humanity that had been empty for 3 centuries. Captain Chen had chosen the battlefield carefully. If they were going to make their last stand, it would be in the place where the human story began. The void spawn fleet followed them there, 1,000 crystalline ships that existed in too many dimensions to count. As they approached Earth's ancient solar system, they began the process of converting normal space into something from their home dimension. Captain, Dr. Santos reported, they're trying to turn the entire system into a dimensional gateway. If they succeed, they can bring through unlimited reinforcements from the void realm. Chen looked out at the planet Earth, dead and empty, but still the symbolic heart of humanity. Then we stop them here. All ships, prepare for final battle protocols. What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was a war between different concepts of reality itself. Human ships fired weapons that rewrote the laws of physics. Void spawn vessels responded by turning themselves into living equations that solved for the destruction of matter. The Retribution led the charge, its hull scarred by 3 centuries of impossible battles. Captain Chen coordinated attacks that used entire planets as ammunition, turning Jupiter into a gravity bomb and Mars into a kinetic projectile. Admiral Korath and his modified fleet fought with desperate courage, their crews pushing technology they barely understood to its absolute limits. They learned dimensional combat through trial by fire, adapting to impossible warfare because the alternative was the end of everything they knew. The battle raged for hours that felt like centuries. Reality itself became a weapon, as both sides tore holes in space-time and fired paradox shells through the wounds. The void spawn began to falter as human tactical superiority and 3 centuries of experience began to tell. Finally, with a sound like the universe screaming, the last void spawn vessel collapsed into a dimensional singularity and vanished. The galaxy was silent. Captain Chen stood on her bridge, looking out at the wreckage of solar systems and the torn fabric of space-time that would take decades to heal. Her crew was exhausted, her ship was damaged, but they had won. Admiral Korath's image appeared on her screen. His face was aged by the stress of the battle, but his eyes showed the deep respect of someone who had fought alongside legends. "Captain Chen," he said formally, "on behalf of the galactic hegemony, I offer our gratitude and our apologies. Humanity has saved us all, and we owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Chen nodded slowly. "Admiral, we didn't fight this battle for gratitude. We fought it because someone had to. Will you be returning to the Maelstrom sector?" Chen looked around her bridge at the crew that had become her family over 3 centuries of war. These people had sacrificed everything to protect a galaxy that had exiled them. They had become something beyond normal humanity, shaped by impossible battles and unwinnable wars. "Yes, Admiral. The void spawn are defeated, but they're not extinct. Something will always be trying to break through from the dark dimensions, and someone will always need to stand guard against it." She paused, then added, "But this time we go back by choice, not as exiles but as guardians. The galaxy knows the truth now. Humanity never surrendered. We never ran away. We went to the place is too dangerous for anyone else and held the line." Dr. Lorena Voss worked frantically in her research station, updating historical records and scientific databases. The official story of human extinction was being replaced with the truth. Humanity had become the galaxy's secret protectors, advancing beyond normal civilization to fight threats that existed outside normal reality. Professor Malik helped her compile the evidence, ensuring that future generations would know what had really happened. The plague years, the mysterious disappearance, the forbidden zone, all of it was being rewritten to reflect the reality of humanity's sacrifice. "Dr. Voss," Malik said as he uploaded the final files, "how do you think history will remember this?" Lorena looked out at the retribution, preparing to return to the dark spaces between stars where humanity stood eternal watch against impossible enemies. "I think they'll remember that when the galaxy needed heroes, they found them in the species they had written off as myths. And I think they'll remember that some people choose to sacrifice everything to protect others, even when those others don't deserve it." Captain Chen's final transmission went out to every world in the galaxy. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Retribution. We return now to the dark places where reality is thin, not as exiles, but as chosen guardians. The galaxy can continue its trade and politics and daily life, secure in the knowledge that in the spaces between stars, human ships patrol the borders of existence itself. We are the watchers in the dark. We are the shield against the night, and we will never stop standing guard." The Retribution folded space around itself and vanished into dimensional transit, heading back to the Maelstrom sector, where humanity would continue its eternal vigil. The galaxy was safe, and everyone finally knew the price that had been paid to keep it that way. In the depths of space, reality healed itself slowly around the scars of battle, and in the Forbidden Zone, human ships took up their positions once more, watching and waiting for the next threat to emerge from the endless dark. The legend had become history, and history would never forget.